Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is how to build a better mini bike. Today, we're going to be adding reinforcements to the engine plate and the foot pegs. This mini bike already has structural support added on the bottom side. There's an angle iron welded under the plate to the frame on this side, this edge, and along the back. That is holding the stock plate to the frame. That's fine. The issue that I'm having is the stock plate is just too thin. So I made a cardboard cutout that fit right over top. I then transferred the template from the cardboard onto a piece of 1/8 inch cyborg meat. I cut this in a manner that I have room to weld on my edges. Over on this side, I can weld in between the jack shaft and here and get a really nice bead or something that resembles a bead. You can weld here, 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 and when we flip this thing over, we can weld up under the front and under here. I left a little bit extra in the front so that we have something to weld to under here. We might trim it back, we might leave it. It's all going to depend if it interferes with the oil dumper. So, you see 4 marks. Those are these engine holes. Originally, I was going to put an adjustable plate on here. I'm not going to go that route, but I'm going to utilize those holes in the welding process. We might even add a couple more, but I think since I have these here, we could add some to our plate and then weld down through into here, and that'll really bind this thing together. My next step is going to be to drill these holes out. The reason being, I'm going to bolt this plate to this plate nice and tight before I weld it. That way, we're not dealing with any alignment issues whatsoever. I have my plate all drilled out. These are for the engine holes. The other ones are going to be for some rosette welds to help hold this plate to the stock one. I'm bolted on tight. I made sure that everything was straight and, somewhat relaxed before I sandwiched it together. That way, none of the bolts are askew at all. At this point, I'll be able to hit these rosette welds. There we go. Get some over in here, along this edge, over here, right here, over here, and in between the jack shaft. I'll see you in a little bit. It's super windy out right now, but I think you guys will be able to hear me. You can see underneath I have angle iron here, right here, and right there. That is all welded on with 7018. It's very strong. So structurally, the edges of this plate shouldn't move. The only weak point would be out here along this edge, where that's the same material. The way that these angle irons are set in, they work sort of like rails. So that takes a lot of the stress off of the outside part of the stock plate. The holes that I had drilled for an adjustable billet plate, I'm just going to clean off, and I'm going to use those to sink some welds back into our new plate from the bottom up. And then I'll go back to the top and finish welding. I'll hit this while I'm here, and this is what I'm talking about. If this interferes with our drain at all, I'm going to trim it back, but not until I weld it. Now that the plate is all welded up, I'm going to make some sort of reinforcements for these pegs. We're just going to leave these here and leave this alone for now and see what I have for material. I'm thinking 3/16 ought to be fine here. I just did the old cardboard to cyborg meat swap and ended up with a series of triangles and some reliefs cut for the stock welds. I'm going to clean these areas off on both sides and weld them in. I just used a series of really strong tack welds. I'm not going to lay a bead all the way along the main frame or the post going back to the peg. I just cleaned them up a little. Now I'm going to hit them with some primer and some paint. I'm all painted up. I'm going to let this cure and move on to the next thing. I'm going to be swapping out this Mikuni VM22 for a stock style carburetor. We'll take a look at that one in a minute. The issue that I'm having here, well, I should have used studs right here instead of these bolts. I tightened them up and you can see where the gasket tore, but it's not tight anymore and it keeps loosening up. So I could switch it to studs and keep it, But if I go to a stock style carburetor, I'm going to have longer studs. It's going to stick to the intake a lot better, and it's going to give us more room for activities. With our engine sitting in the frame and the new ergonomics of this seat, the air filter and the carburetor itself is right behind your foot, and I can actually feel it rubbing on my calf. So chances are that's going to be an issue, and I'm probably going to keep knocking the filters off. Where I moved the motor up 1/8 of an inch, I could try to use a EC carburetor's manifold and get up closer. However, we don't really need a VM22. I'm going to go ahead and remove this entire unit, manifold, linkage, and all. Alright, she's off of there. All ready to go on the next mini bike. Now I have my sights set on this stock Tillotson carburetor. I know I've showed you guys this trick before, but if you ever wondered what that little phallus on the end of the choke lever's for, it's to plug your stock fuel line when you're servicing a carburetor. Well, maybe it's not completely stock. This is a Tillotson 660 Carb. There's a little bit of a difference. Can you feel me now? The one on the left is the 660 carburetor. The one on the right is a stock non-EPA GX200 Predator 212 style carburetor. One thing is not like the other. Studs, new gasket, get that carburetor on there. One of these metal gaskets with the rubber seal and the velocity stack. I'm going to clean this one off before I install it. Oh yeah, it's been a minute. I forgot the insulator. Whoops. Thanks to my friend Grey Goat, at least I didn't forget the new gasket. He keeps me hooked up. The fitment of this carburetor is substantially tighter. It's also affixed to the intake on our head the best it'll ever be. And with proper jetting, we're going to have more than enough flow to run this high performance motor. Before I put old Tilly here aside for a little bit, I'm going to swap out that fan shroud. These colors really match the theme of this bike. I also added an OMB Warehouse governorless linkage. Now, I just need a cable. Since I'm running a thumb throttle and not a twist job, I'm going to use this old cable I have. I'm going to cut the conduit back so that I have roughly the same amount of cable as the one I just took off. I just have my clevis snugged on so that I don't lose my nice new end on the cable. Next, I'm going to install the engine on the mini bike. The engine's in. I don't have it completely tightened down, but I do have the throttle cable hooked up, kill switch, ready to go. I still have to put the driver on it and get the belt on and align the motor. These do have the ability to pivot a little bit, so I'll leave that where it's at. I want to trim these lobes back, but I can take this whole seat frame off separate. I can install the gas tank, fuel line, and oh yeah, we still need an air filter. Might as well work on that next. It's going to be a little bit of a project. In order to make this work, I'm going to have to remove this exhaust system. But that's alright. We have plenty of room for new activities. I upgraded the 5/8 axle bolt to a grade 8 with a washer and a nylock nut. Over on this side, I used a 5/8 collar for a spacer. That way, all my contacting surfaces can move freely. I reinstalled the 3x8 spun aluminum gas tank. I was able to get a heater hose around this clamp, and since I plan on using these tabs, I have a bit of a tight spot up in the front. I might see if I can find something thin enough. If not, I know the guy that paints the frame. Got a filter, and I'm going to leave the shut off here. I know I have one back down here on our stock carb, so if we ever have to work on anything, we can shut that off, shut this off, take this off, do whatever we want. For the exhaust, I'm going to be using the straight shooter from my friends at ombwarehouse.com. I welded in a spline, and then I hit it with that high heat grill paint. Oh yeah, I like that. Okay, let's see if we can't get this filter on here. Here's the deal. if I just take this big glorious son of a gun and I put it on the velocity stack, we end up with a similar issue where the filter itself is right up against the rider's calf. It's sort of in a direct line of fire if your leg or your foot were to come off the peg. So, we're going to try to improve that by moving where the filter goes. This is a 2.5 inch reinforced silicone tube. It came with a couple heavy duty clamps. Those are real nice. On the other side, I have a 2.5 inch elbow. This is for a shop vac. We're going to be coming up at an angle, but we don't need to come this far away from the engine or the carburetor. So, watching my clearance here, I'm going to see what I can trim off the end down here. We can bring this thing in. We can also twist it if we have to and aim it in different directions. We can also shorten the top side if we have to bring whatever we connect to it lower towards the engine and away from the frame. I just went ahead for the maximum, knowing that we can cut this shorter and we can manipulate which direction we want our first bend to go in. Well, that'll work just fine. We're a lot further back from our leg now, too. For the second part, I think we'll try to fit the vacuum tube in to see where the bend goes. And then we can make our adjustment. At full length, with it stuffed down inside, I'm only to about right there. If we look on the other side, I'm still above the bend. So, it would be nice to go down as much as we can too. Let me see what I can't get out of that. A little goat once told me, if you use tape to mark out your lines when you're cutting your silicone tubes, they'll come out perfect every time. I have this marked for 1.5 the width of my painter's tape. I know that I'll be able to bring the vacuum tube down in and I need to be just south of this bend so that when we clamp it, it seals nice. We don't want it oblong at the top where air can get in. I have the vacuum tube pushed all the way down right to the bend. We could cut the tube shorter, but we're still going to be limited right here. So it actually behooves us to leave that little bit of length in there. It's not heavy, but this silicone has an incredible vacuum characteristic. This plastic isn't even coming out of there unless I grab both ends and work it. We're going to put a clamp on that thing. The same down here. That's pretty sturdy. It doesn't move a whole lot. The only thing going on the end is going to be a filter. I think that's as good as it's going to get. So I'm going to clean off my tape, get my clamps on there, and grab that filter. Nice. In case it was bugging you as much as it was bugging me, I went ahead and cleaned that sticker off of there. Don't need that going up in the intake. Here we are. Completely secured. Easy access to my nuts and bolts in case we need to make any adjustments. But right there, we are just under the frame and well out of the way of my leg, at least for a direct impact. Here's what it looks like from above. If I sit on it, the only time I'm touching it is when I have my leg down and my foot on the ground and I go for the peg. We're all clear. Now, I have to put my driver on, get my belt on there, make sure everything's aligned, tighten the motor down. I have the brackets and the respective side cover, but I prefer to run my Torquezilla out in the wide open. I've been known to change my pulleys around, and I like to know what's going on with my belt the best I can. I just topped her off. A little fresh 93. We'll see if it starts. Fuel's on. Choke. Make sure we check the valve here too. That one's also turned on. I'll hold the brake just in case. I just need to make a minor adjustment on my return so that I go all the way back on my idle. It might be a little tweak on the spring. It might be a couple something twist back there, so let me see what happens. It's really been a minute since I've used these stock carburetors. I think I assembled this backwards. This butterfly looking piece, I'm going to flip that over, and that'll bring our clevis out this way, and just remember what it looks like. It's not going to look like that when I'm done. Without a gas tank on here, this is super simple. I just slid my 7/16 skinny wrench underneath to hold my hex bolt. I used another 7/16 to take off my nylock nut, my washer, and the old bat wing here. I just switched things around on the back side, carefully put it back on, making sure not to twist this rod around so I don't ming up my throttle. And now I'm just going to reattach my cable, set my tension, and tighten my nut. While I was here with this thing taken apart, I replaced this spring with something a little beefier that I had laying around. Oh yeah. Let's see what happens now. It doesn't need that block of wood, by the way. That's just for the sole purpose of presentation. Switch on, fuel on, choke on, switch on, holding the brake. Nice and smooth. I can't wait to take this thing for a ride. And that's exactly what I intend to do in the next video. Because as always, it's a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching. And I'll catch you on the next one.